So, namaste. Thank you so much, first of all, Adam and Sabina, for inviting me to share during this month on Ahimsa. And thank you, everyone who has joined as well tonight to share, or this morning, wherever you're at in the world, to share this meaningful, I hope, time together. Let's begin settling into a comfortable space in any easeful position, and if you wish, you may as well close your eyes. Taking a full deep breath in through the nose and exhaling through the mouth with full awareness and presence. Noticing how the breath so lovingly invites us to fully reside in this moment. We gently bring the attention in the middle of the chest, slightly to the right, in the so-called heart center. This very intimate portal to this deeper dimension of our being. As we vest the awareness naturally in the heart center, I will simply share a few questions and I invite you to receive them in your heart. After this month of contemplation on Ahimsa, has your perspective from violence deepened, shifted, transformed in any way? Would you perhaps now qualify certain aspects that are expressed through your actions, words, thoughts as violent in a way that you hadn't recognized them before? What has been thus far the impact of that recognition? Has it perhaps led to deeper contemplations? Has it inspired or urged you into transformative actions? Has it ignited a more understanding or compassionate space from where you now receive yourself or someone else? Let's just simply rest with these contemplations for a few more moments. with this acknowledgement of whatever may have been cultivated throughout these last weeks. You can gently open the eyes if you wish, or just keep them closed. Namaste and welcome again, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Before continuing, I also wanted to mention that Adam and Sabina will be offering a course on the fundamentals of meditation, an online course, which will be starting on September 21st, and there will be an introductory talk. You can find more information on their Facebook page as well as on the website if you're interested. It will be a fantastic course, so I highly recommend it. And let's jump right into the topic of Ahimsa. Perhaps you followed the last few talks given by Adam, Stephen, and Jimena. And I will touch upon just a brief recap on what has been shared, just for those who perhaps didn't have the chance to listen to them. And then actually approach Ahimsa from the perspective of nonviolent communication. So Ahimsa, as has been already said, is a Sanskrit term that normally is translated as non-violence, but actually a more maybe loyal translation to the Sanskrit term will be non-harm or non-injury, which perhaps feels a little bit more broader. And as we know, it comes from the Ashtanga system of Patanjali, who described them in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, which dates about 1,800 years. And basically, these yamas and niyamas are a very wholesome system which allows us to purify all the different veils that may obscure the recognition of who we truly are. So eventually, even though this is in itself a path of purification, it is also part of the Ashtanga system, which eventually leads to yoga, which is union. So it's not the purification for the sake of purification, going onto an endless stream of purifications, but rather is the purification for the sake of the revelation of our true nature. And that's a very important aspect, even though it may seem subtle or not as significant, but actually it is, because the very framework from which we are approaching these yamas, and in particular Ahimsa right now, is from the perspective of self-inquiry, which means that everything is actually being explored and investigated through a deeper introspection, not only about the one who is perhaps engaging in violent acts or who is not aware of certain aggressions that are actually playing out in their own thoughts or emotions and feelings, but rather even farther than that, who is even the observer of that one. And by recognizing that, then we come to abide in that ultimate seer, which is who we truly are. And so I just wanted to bring this lens so that there's a greater paradigm that allows us to really settle ourselves into the bigger picture, which is truly that thirst for ultimate freedom, which will only come through that absolute recognition of our true nature. And then the yamas and niyamas are powerful tools that allow us to cultivate that radiance of the heart and to unveil the many layers that may be obscuring that recognition. And so that said, Ahimsa has already been explored from different angles by my brothers and sisters, or sister, and they've already touched upon the cause of Ahimsa, which ultimately can just be traced down to ignorance of who we truly are, which in turn leads to fear. And that fear may have different ramifications, right? It may be expressed as jealousy or competition or doubt or a need for protection or for rebellion, different ways, right? And those consequences or expressions of of that primordial fear, which is the primordial expression of ignorance, may be very gross or much more subtle, to such an extent that may have become totally normalized in our society, as there's so many micro aggressions that are happening on a daily basis that we barely notice, and that we actually may even justify or may think, oh, that's too, you're being too picky to notice that or to bring that up. But actually, there might be a greater seed there. And again, for what, or what will be the aim of cultivating ahimsa? Well, one very, very, very fundamental one, and that's one of the reasons why ahimsa is placed as the first one of the yamas, even though the system of yamas and niyamas is not to be understood as something sequential, but something like a tree that has ramifications that are somehow being touched upon simultaneously, as all of them are interlinked, and they can really impact the other one, inform the other one, deepen the recognition of how one requires more purification, and in turn doing so with all of them. And so still, ahimsa is placed as the first and foremost one, because it will start outrooting the most vigorous seeds of animal instincts, which are very much based on that need for survival, and which, in another way to put it, is fear of death, and that in its more brutal way will turn out into violence, and well, the more maybe significant way of that violence will be killing one another, but then there will be all those more subtle ways, right? So this is kind of just an overlook of ahimsa, as some of the things that we could recap from the last few talks, even though I highly recommend you to watch them. There's a lot of inspiration and also very beautiful quotes from many spiritual teachers. And so let's go now a little bit more into MVC, actually. So nonviolent communication. Some of you may actually be already to some extent familiar or acquaintance with nonviolent communication. It was actually developed by Marshall Rosenberg, psychologist from the US, and it has also been known as compassionate communication or conscious communication. And its very root, of course, is this principle of ahimsa, nonviolence. And well, why would we want to look at nonviolent communication? One of the main ingredients, or the main reasons why that could be so, is because life, it's definitely a dance in which relating is constantly happening, whether it's relating to oneself or relating to the seeming other, or relating to a situation or the environment or other seeming beings, right? And so in that relating, any form of communication will be required, whether that communication happens in a verbal way, in a non-verbal way, whether it happens in the same language or another, but it does take place. It can be totally subtle and intuitive, or it can be very overt and tangible. But communication will be there, present, and actually will play a crucial role into what that encounter will bring about eventually, or at least in that particular instant. And it will also have an impact on the way that the relationship, whether it is with oneself or another, will also carry out later on. And that's why for Marshall Rosenberg it became so important to also contemplate on communication. And he actually did even say at one point that really almost all the communication that we have been conditioned by or taught or educated as is pretty much violent, because it is embedded with right-wrong thinking. It implies that there's one way that is good and another way that is bad. So it's biased and it's relative, and it somehow, in praising one, it is also creating another as not pertinent or something that cannot be embraced. And that is actually something that connects with a very powerful quote by Gandhi, who said at one point, what kind of victory is such that leaves someone defeated? what kind of victory is such that leaves someone defeated. And that is a very powerful thing to contemplate. Because in our right-wrong thinking, in our way of living out of a sense of separation, oh, of course, a victory will be, well, I win and you lose, or this group, or this nation, or this collective, or this community. But from that ultimate perspective of ahimsa, that wouldn't be in any way a victory. And that is something that also, as a principle, was translated into nonviolent communication by Marcel Rosenberg as a principle which he named everyone's needs matter. So there's no one's needs which won't be taken into consideration, and also find a way to be met, to be fulfilled, satisfied, to be embraced, acknowledged, and also to find a way so that they get nurtured. And before I go into that, I'd like to say as well that the practice of nonviolent communication is not so much only a tool or a practice or just a technique for conflict resolution or mediation, but it is really an invitation for a profound and total shift of paradigm from a consciousness that is based on fear, on separateness, and on life alienating perception of everyone and situations, and to a consciousness that is based on love, based on union, and based on a life-supporting way of engaging. And that is really the most profound invitation that we can take on when embarking into learning and starting to embody, or at least having this inspiration or aspiration to embody nonviolent communication. And there's another very powerful quote from Gandhi that I'd like to share with you too. He said, "Ahimsa is more than just the absence of violence. It is intense love." So ahimsa is not just peace, and it's not just abstaining oneself from aggression, but it's actually an active take on life, which is love, and that is actually the easiest way to cultivate ahimsa. Because think about it. Think about that person that you love the most in your life right now, or one of them, that the moment you evoke the presence, the face, all that they somehow inspire in your being, you feel totally filled up with love. And allow that radiance of the love that through them permeates in you now to be fully impregnating you. And as you are bathing in that love, connected to this being, try to imagine if you would be able, in this love, to create any harm to them. When you're in this consciousness of love, when you're in this abidance in love with them. And you'll see that it is not possible. It's as if you were having two opposing kings wanting to be on the same throne. And when love is there, that violence, that ahimsa cannot be there. And so the easiest, most accessible, and most natural way for any human being to actually cultivate ahimsa is just to open up to love in a way that could start by being personal, and then it becomes more and more transparent until it hopefully at one point could even become universal and unconditional. So that's really the invitation, because there's no other space for anything else. Actually, in love, there can be a total embrace of even disagreements or having totally opposing views upon a particular subject. And yet, love will hold the space for that and the greater picture too. And so, by bringing this awareness of love and by cultivating love, by rooting ourselves in love, the, the very natural language of the heart will start radiating. And that's exactly what Marshall Rosenberg was touching upon. So, due to the amount of time that we have together, I won't be able to really go into the explanation of the system or the model that he created. But what I'd like to offer to you tonight is rather a more holistic perspective of the main elements that are part of it. And then from there, of course, you can always contact me if you're curious. But as well, there's some books and there's some other resources online and many beautiful trainers that are out there sharing via workshops and other things. But I'd like for you to take something with you that you can already practice tonight with you. And that's also the reason why nonviolent communication doesn't require for any other to have to learn it, for you to already practice it. Nonviolent communication will focus mainly on connecting. So love could also be somehow expressed in a more tangible or relative way as connection. And we can have the intention to connect with ourselves and with any other being at any given time, no matter what they may be saying, no matter what our heads and minds are saying. But my intention, my truest intention in any particular moment, can be so anchored and so burning to connect that is all my intent, and that's where I'm focusing. And so that is the main emphasis on nonviolent communication, the willingness to connect and to remain connected, heart to heart, so heart to heart to myself and heart to heart to the apparent other. And through that connection, then the rest of the communication happens. You will see when you start doing that, and I invite you to do that the next time you have an interaction with anyone, and it doesn't matter again whether they know about nonviolent communication, whether they're speaking to you about something random, you just place your awareness on keeping the connection, and you'll see some things will start dropping away. It's not so relevant, even what they are saying, honestly, whether you agree or not with a view upon that particular subject, whether the use of words is the one that you like or not. You're truly wanting to connect with, which means that you are actually curious, and that's another key element. So connection as the main intention, curiosity as to what is alive in my being and in the other's being. And this brings about another element which is so powerful and beautiful, is I could say that oneself is one space. So one space. Then in the meeting, even with myself, there's another space, and it becomes perhaps more apparent with another one, right? So let's say there's two beings. So one space meeting another space. But when these two meet, actually a third space right here arises. And that space is totally unknown. It's uncharted territory. And it is the mystery with full potentialities to be only known and discovered by these two beings in their encounter. And this is exactly what we are being gifted by in every single gathering with another one. And so, by that, if we bring that total curiosity and that intention to remain connected, this third space will show us what previously maybe could not be fathomed. And that means that I will actually truly listen to you. So the two main elements as well in the dance of communication from this nonviolent approach will be, on one side, the way in which I'm expressing myself, and that will be authentically. So I will try as much as I can to actually express myself in full sincerity, authentically, with radical honesty. And of course, that will depend on varying degrees from where I'm settling with myself, from the level of authenticity that I do also have with myself, that which is not within myself to myself, I cannot offer to others. And also, there will be perhaps some varying factors, but I can still have this very, very powerful intention to communicate as authentically as I may can. Yes, and that could also mean that at a certain point I cannot be more sincere, or I may feel a little bit reluctant to reveal something, and I can express that too. So authenticity doesn't mean not to even say, wow, I wish I could be more sincere with you, but at this point there's a few things that I'm fearful to share with you. I'm not totally sure about the impact they may have in our connection, and I'd rather wait, you see? So authenticity is there, not necessarily the revealing of that information. So that's one aspect, the authentic expression. And the other aspect is, okay, I've expressed myself, so now how do I receive the other one? So in this third space, I've come here, expressed myself as authentically as I could. Now I take a step back, and how do I receive this one that comes in that third space? I receive them with an active and curious listening. So I'm not just there, already assuming what they're gonna say, or somehow thinking about what I'm gonna respond back, or anticipating what they are going to say about the thing that I want to say next, and trying to prearrange my response to that, but rather I'm fully present. So it's a space of absolute presence, or as much as we can master, yeah? And so these elements are primordial, and with these very simple elements, we are now weaving in and out this dance of communion, which ultimately is what we are all seeking. And so there's something very, very important in the approach of nonviolent communication. So just to give you a very rough idea, the four elements of the model are observations, feelings, needs, and requests. And sometimes requests won't even be there, because with the acknowledgement and the understanding of needs, something may be just fully satisfied. Yeah, but sometimes requests may be need. And what Marshall Rosenberg is telling us is that actually needs are at the very core of absolutely every single action, word, and emotion, feeling, and thought. So instead of focusing our attention, and by doing so sometimes creating so much activity in the actions, or in the feelings, or in the thoughts, or in the words, let's focus the attention on that which was the very seed of all of them, which are the needs. Because all of us, and this is what creates needs to be needs, all of us share fundamental, essential, core values or needs that are universal for any human being. And by focusing there, we can actually come to a greater understanding and to a space of openness, of vulnerability, of deep willingness to be seen and to see the other one. And through that window, through that entry point, then the rest will just very natural unfold. And so that's why, as if we go back to that quote of Gandhi, that said, what kind of victory is such in which there's someone who remains defeated? Then Marshall Rosenberg took that as well, and he said, everyone's needs matter. And that's exactly the very root cause here. So he defines needs as actually flavors of life and flavors of love. So, and at some point he even said, needs are divine energy. So it's that pulsating life force that is wanting to be expressed. So universal needs, we could have, I'm just going to mention some so that you get an idea, but there's plenty of them. But the main and most important criteria to know whether something is a need or not is to know whether they are universally shared by all human beings at any given point in time. Meaning, maybe right now I don't feel that need, but at some point I've known that need to be alive in me, and so that's why I can relate to that being alive for you in this particular moment. So universal needs will be shelter and sustenance and celebration and friendship and love and a sense of aesthetics and growth, development, transformation. Yes, all these different things. There's a huge list of them. And the point is, everyone's needs matter. So when I'm meeting in that third space with this other being and I'm coming with that pure intention to remain connected, what I'm actually focusing on is whatever they are saying, what is it that is pulsating in their heart as this flavor of life or of love that wants to be expressed. Perhaps it hasn't been met, and there's certain emotions that reveal that, which may turn into frustration or grief or mourning or sadness or discouragement. Yes, perhaps that need actually has been met, and what I'm finding as your expression right now is a feeling of joy or gratitude or appreciation or celebration or ecstasy or altruism. And so what I'm hinting here is that the feeling is only the evidence of whether that need, that fundamental pulse of life has been met or not. So every time we're just invited to look deeper. And so the invitation for let's say this week until the next topic comes would be actually to come into meeting yourself with that pure intention to remain just connected. One of the greatest forms of Ahimsa, of violence, is actually the denial of life, which means the denial of the present moment as it is. Another way to say it is the resistance to whatever is arising in this moment. Yes? And we experience that most often with ourselves. There's a certain arising sensation in ourselves, maybe physical. I have a toothache suddenly, or a little bit of a knee pain, or maybe I have some energetic contraction, and suddenly I label that as something negative and something that shouldn't be there, and then I just resist it, right? Or it may be something emotional or something mental. I have a thought, even if it is a self-judgment that is negative. I'm not worthy of a loving relationship, or I will never get that job that I'm so much looking forward to. Yes, and the point is that we tend to resist to it, and that resistance is the first form of ahimsa. Plus, it blocks any possible transformation. So the first step, and this is part of the nonviolent communication approach, will be to just open up to the acceptance of what is. How can we do that if we are so focused on the expression that things are taken? It will be very difficult because there will be still an attachment to the form, and we will say, well, if it's pleasurable, if it's something that brings me ease and peace and joy, I may want to open to that. But if it's something that feels contracted, that feels blurry and feels dense, I actually don't want to. Yeah. But if we look a little deeper, and I find within myself, well, actually, why am I feeling right now contracted? Oh, wow. It is because I'm so much longing for perhaps connection, perhaps self-love, and it hasn't been fulfilled. And in this very moment, I turn my attention to something deeper. The heart kind of turns itself to itself, and it reveals what has been there that wasn't given the space. Yes? So in this way, we are now creating the space for deep listening. And so one of the dimensions of nonviolent communication will be just actually with oneself. We call that in nonviolent communication self-empathy. Yes? And another aspect will be actually to turn that into relating with one another in that third space that we were talking about. And so we will offer empathy. And then at one point, we might also, again, open up into the authentic expression. And again, it will be a dance, yes? So the most powerful thing about this invitation of Marshall Rosenberg is that there's countless opportunities because we are in constant relating, and we are given innumerable occasions in which we can really try to turn the attention to that intention of connection, heart to heart, to become curious as to what is present rather than to judge it beforehand, and to actually bring the attention like deeper and deeper to the seed of the trigger, to the seed of the emotion, into the very pulsating value or calling or longing or need that was present. And through that, a lot of understanding comes in. So on a personal level, you will actually start noticing that it will bring you a great understanding of the makeup of the personhood, of how this personality that we are normally so much identified with is actually playing out, and it's like it's somehow expressions and why it has certain pattern behaviors and habituated tendencies, with the perspective that it's not personal and I don't need to engage with it in a reactive way. Actually, I get to understanding, and I actually even get to appreciate it because I can actually root it into these needs. And on a relational level, it will also bring about the same capacity to now start bringing up a greater understanding, a loving kindness to the other one, and even more so, that compassionate nature of the heart will start blossom, and that love as the very root of the practice of Ahimsa, that intense love that Gandhi was mentioning, will just have the space to flower and to shine through. Well, there's so much to share about this, definitely, but I'm aware of the time and I wouldn't want to take more of your time. So I hope this gives you a little bit of a perspective of how you could start creating a little bit of transformation into how you may be connecting. So what I'm trying to say here is not so much what you say, but rather the intention from where it comes. And I'm sure that all of us can relate to someone having expressed things in very powerful, beautiful, perfectly chosen words, and yet we could definitely feel energetically and in an intuitive way that the intention wasn't pure, that there was still a wanting of manipulation, or that they were having like some personal interest, or that they were saying something that they weren't meaning. Yes? So that's why this pure intention of really connecting, of becoming curious as to what is alive in you, and again honoring everyone's needs. Because if I win myself, yes, in that particular moment, I may have taken what I wanted. Maybe my goal was met in that particular instance, but isn't the relationship going to suffer in the medium or long term due to that? Because you will know that to some extent I didn't acknowledge you. I didn't take you into account with the same respect that I was taking my own needs, right? And so bringing that in rather than the words will be so much more felt. And the other person will say, well, okay, maybe those words weren't the most wittily chosen, but I can definitely feel that your intention is for the two of us to really connect, to really meet, to find some way of going about this situation that doesn't put anyone on the spot in a way that it won't be a win-win connection. And the point is that whenever we do that, also we are growing together, not only in love, but as well in trust, as well in resilience, as well in that capacity to come back to the heart and then to turn again and again to the heart rather than to the mind to find strategies. So the mind will totally or constantly try to lay out strategies, plan out things. But when we turn into this other compass of the heart, well, see, I can just arrive naked with whatever is authentic in myself, with that pure intention of deeply connect to the heart of this other being and trust that whatever may resolve out of this situation will find us. Because the moment we really understand each other, the moment I see you for what is so relevant, so meaningful, so precious for you right now, I won't want to damage that, to put that into risk. Because in that love, everything will try to be embraced. And if something perhaps falls apart, it will be willingly from the two sides. Because in that third space, perhaps something that was so important here, as in my own personal space, so crystallized, actually in the meeting, I realized, wow, it's no longer so relevant, but it's out of somehow a process of transformation that happened in that encounter. And so just to conclude, before we go into the Q&A, if in case there's any sharings or questions that arise, I'd like to offer you an opportunity to put this into practice with yourself. And so I invite you tonight, if you are not feeling too tired, or at some point tomorrow, and especially the next time you feel a little bit triggered, or you've had a conversation that left you feeling less than peaceful, that you just find a quiet space in that moment or later on, whenever you have the time, and just come back to that intention of being simply present for whatever is arising in a life. If it was something that happened the previous day, you can evoke that situation and allow the echoes of it to unravel throughout your being. You may notice things on a sensorial level, energetically, emotionally, mentally. And as you're allowing that without any resistance, and also without getting caught into it, so you're not going along with it, identifying yourself with it, you're simply present. At the same time, you bring about this intention to go deeper and to allow those things to reveal what is the need that at that point wasn't met. And as you identify the need, when that happens, there's in general a great sense of relief. In a way, a sense of wow, like, oh, that's what it was. Sometimes it comes together as well with some tears or with a sigh, with a sense of deep relaxation and release. There's a sense of, oh, now I'm offering that space to be too. And there's nothing else to do. Sometimes that is enough. That is the first step of accepting, acknowledging, yes? And from there, perhaps you will notice, and you can ask this to yourself, is there anything that I could now do in this very moment, or the next time I find myself in a very similar situation, to honor this need that was very much asking to be fulfilled? So this is the part of the request in which we will try to find a concrete, doable, specific action that you will state in positive terms. So we won't say, I will not curse when I'm talking to my father, but rather I will, tomorrow when I talk to my father on the phone, I will refrain from using these and these and these words. Yes? So it becomes very specific, concrete, doable, and it's put in specific terms. So you know exactly what you want to do, not what you don't want to do, which doesn't tell you what you actually want to do. Well, thank you so much for your presence and for being here, sharing the space together. And now, if there's any questions, I would love to try to support, bring in any clarity if I can. I'm not totally sure how this goes, so let's see if I can see any questions. Right now, I don't. I'm new on technologies, so I'm gonna try to figure this out. Mm, I don't see anything. Perhaps Adam or Sabina can help me. I don't know. mm, I'm sorry. Oy. Mm, Okay, so it seems that there are no questions. That's why I wasn't seeing them. um, okay, so I guess that's it for the rest of the evening or today. Um, I then will invite us to conclude with a moment of silence and integration of whatever may have been seated. So let's just rest in whichever posture feels natural and easeful. Gently closing the eyes, bringing the awareness to the middle of the chest, slightly to the right in the heart center. And simply igniting this intention to connect deeply to what's truly alive within yourself, not the mental content or only the feelings or the bodily sensations, but that which is truly so profoundly alive. As we set up this intention, we may notice how whichever resistance to what is starts dissolving into the greater spaciousness of presence. presence that has no others. And as such, any sense of separation as the cause for violence is naturally dissolved. And the awakening heart of love and compassion blossoms in the greatest of needs, which is union. Knowing who we truly are. Resting in this loving presence, abiding as it. We formally conclude this time together. Namaste. Thank you again so very, very, very much. May our days be inspired by this intense love, which is Ahimsa. Have a beautiful rest of your lives.